Well, I think I have another good story for you all tonight. So sit down, buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride with this one. I found this article written by ABC News. The headline reads this: Trump officials pressuring federal prosecutors to bring criminal charges against New York Attorney General Letitia James, according to sources. Prosecutors have not found clear evidence that James committed a crime, the sources say. Once again, welcome to Tyrone Bowman live on tonight. According to ABC News, let's talk about this story. Top Trump administration officials are pressuring federal prosecutors in Virginia to bring charges against New York Attorney General Letitia James for mortgage fraud. Despite investigators so far failing to find sufficient evidence supporting such charges, according to sources familiar with the investigation. After a 5-month-long investigation and interviews with more than a dozen witnesses, federal prosecutors have so far uncovered no clear evidence that James knowingly made false statements to a financial institution to secure favorable terms on a mortgage for her Virginia home, according to multiple sources briefed on the investigation. Trump himself has pressured the Department of Justice leadership to investigate James more aggressively, and to officials. Ed Martin, the head of the DOJ's Weaponization Working Group, and Bill Pulte, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, have pushed the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia to seek an indictment of James. So, let's get this straight. So far, they have found nothing criminal to charge the Attorney General in New York City with. And this all is supposedly evolving around misinformation on a mortgage application. You know, when the witch hunt is on, where the headhunters are on, they will say or do anything to get what they want in the end. Know that. And this is about what took place in New York City. When federal prosecutors recently declined to indict James, Pulte encouraged Trump to fire Eric Siebert, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, and replace him with a prosecutor who would be willing to bring charges against James, sources said. So James Pulte wants a prosecutor in place that will do what he's told to do, despite the contrary, that there's nothing criminal that has occurred. Just think about it for a minute. You know, I know a lot of innocent people who are locked up in prison right now. Nobody cares. Nobody gives a damn. Because the prosecutors got their conviction, that's all they cared about. So, the move to seek an indictment against one of the president's political rivals, who successfully brought a civil fraud case against Trump last year and leads multiple lawsuits challenging his administration's policies, would mark a significant escalation in what the president's critics have labeled a campaign of political retribution. Pulte and Martin have argued that James committed mortgage fraud because one of the documents related to a 2023 home purchase by James falsely indicated the property would be her primary residence. However, investigators have so far determined that the document, a limited power of attorney form used by James's niece to sign documents on her behalf when James closed on the home, was never considered by the loan officers who approved the mortgage, sources say. So what's the big deal here? How many people fill out forms every day and miss filling out the form the proper way? People do it all the time. But in the world of politics, in the high stakes game of political retribution, This is a big deal, though it could be simply an error if there was one that occurred. Lawyers drafted the document itself for a third-party closing company based on a template that was never corrected, sources said, and every other document in James's loan file for the mortgage accurately stated that she would not reside at the home. But yet they insist on bringing the charges anyway. Prosecutors have not yet been able to produce evidence that James knowingly filled out the power of attorney form incorrectly to influence the bank that issued the mortgage, said sources familiar with the investigation findings thus far. James has denied wrongdoing, and her lawyer, Abe Lowell, has criticized the criminal referral as, quote, 3 pages of stale, threadbare allegations, end quote, that he called, quote, the next salvo in President Trump's revenge tour against Attorney General James, end quote. Given the cascade of unsubstantiated allegations coming from the Trump administration on its mortgage fraud crusade against Democrats, it's no surprise they are having trouble finding an objective and law-abiding prosecutor who would ignore the facts and the evidence to manufacture sham charges. Quote, close quote. Lowell said in a statement to ABC News, quote, as we have repeatedly said, any impartial and non-political injury would conclude Attorney General James did not violate any laws managing her properties, end quote. A White House spokesperson declined to comment when contacted by ABC News. Representatives from the Justice Department and the Federal Housing Finance Agency did not respond to a request for comment. The contentious investigation comes as Trump, Pulte, and Martin have accused numerous officials of engaging in mortgage fraud, with other investigations targeting Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook and Democratic Senator Adam Schiff. I gotta laugh because this ain't going nowhere with Schiff. Schiff allegations both are denied. It's going nowhere. It's not going to work, especially with Senator Adam Schiff. You know, I would lend some credibility to this if it was on both sides. There are no Republicans being criminally charged for anything, no matter what they say, no matter what they do, or how many times they've done it. They're never charged. But when it comes to the Democrats, look up in New York City. Eric Adams can't even win an upcoming election in November. He's not going to win as an independent candidate. That's why he has been offered an ambassadorship to Saudi Arabia. Why? Because with Adams out of the way, and should Zohran Mamdani become the next mayor, then that's an opportunity of quote unquote causation to be able to come into the city to take it over. Read between the lines, ladies and gentlemen. Pay attention to everything that's going on. Martin is also investigating James regarding a New York home, and federal prosecutors in Albany have issued subpoenas to James in connection with her civil fraud case against Trump and her corruption case against the National Rifle Association, according to multiple sources. So she doesn't have the right to sue? Why doesn't she have the right to sue? While Martin's investigation of James's Virginia properties has failed to yield clear evidence of fraud, sources said, he has taken aggressive steps to publicize the allegations and leapfrogged multiple steps usually taken by prosecutors. Last month, he sent James's attorney a letter asking that she resign from her role as the New York Attorney General, arguing it would serve the good of the state and nation for her to leave office. Are you serious? So that's the intent. Demand that the woman resign. But what about the bumbling idiots they have in power now? Making all kinds of mistakes all across the board. And nobody is resigning from anything. If anything, they're tripling and quadrupling down on all the stuff that they're doing. Her resignation from office would give the people of New York and America more peace than proceeding. I would take this as an act of good faith, Martin said. Don't resign, James. Stay in office. Days after sending the letter, Martin posed for a New York Post photographer outside James's Brooklyn home wearing a Columbus-style trench coat. He later posted a photo from his visit on social media. See that right there? That right there should be causation for James to bring charges against him. He has no right to be going to her personal place of residence. That's called intimidation. That's the reason why people don't like Republicans now, because of stuff like this. And then they get mad when people open up their mouths and speak against them because deep down they're thin-skinned. They can dish it, but they can't take it. As ABC News previously reported, the visit and photo earned him a rebuke from Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputy Todd Blanche, who told him the trip was counterproductive and harmful to his investigation, sources said. I commend the Attorney General Pam Bondi for speaking out, and the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche for speaking out, because he was out of pocket, quote unquote, in the language of my people. Bruh, you were out of pocket. Now suppose something would have happened to the New York Attorney General with him doing that. Suppose somebody would have physically harmed her and her family. Then he would have disavowed all knowledge to the contrary. Then he would have tried to sanitize stuff on his media post because he put it on social media. Despite the lack of evidence of law, you will take whatever actions you have been directed to take to make good on President Trump's and Attorney General Bondi's calls for revenge. For the reason alone, Lowell said in a letter to Martin, a copy of which was reviewed by ABC. The mortgage investigation has exposed cracks in the DOJ leadership and raised fresh concerns that Trump officials are seeking retribution for the ill-fated prosecutions of the president, sources said. Each of the investigations into James, Cook, and Schiff revolves around two figures in the Trump administration who have since burnished their reputations for aggressively publicizing their claims of mortgage fraud. Pulte, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency and chairman of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, has issued the federal letters alleging the officials committed mortgage fraud, while Martin, who holds multiple titles as U.S. Pardon Attorney, Special Attorney for Mortgage Fraud, Associate Deputy Attorney General, and Director of the DOJ's Weaponization Working Group, has spearheaded the investigation at the Justice Department. Before taking on his four roles, Martin briefly served as the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. He was the first person in recent history to run the pivotal office without any experience as a prosecutor or judge. Well, God darn it, I can become a judge then. If other people can become politicians without any experience in judges and prosecutors, I can become a sitting judge as well. He dismissed dozens of prosecutors who worked on cases involving the January 6th Capitol attack. No, they resigned. He didn't dismiss them. They would not do what he wanted, and they left. And he defended the rioters who stormed the Capitol building and called out potential targets of investigations on social media. Trump withdrew Martin's nomination for D.C. U.S. Attorney in May after he lost the Senate support and instead opted to place him in the highest echelon of DOJ leadership in four official roles that did not require confirmation. Yeah, because he would have made a lousy senator anyway. That's why he didn't win. Martin has initiated some of his investigations based on criminal referrals by Pulte, a private equity executive whose family runs the third largest home construction company in the United States. Pulte built a substantial public profile on social media by using Twitter to share his philanthropic work. Through his outspoken presence last year, prompted some members of his family to issue a statement distancing themselves from him. We additionally believe that some of Bill Pulte's public communications through social media, public appearances, interviews, self-published articles, and more may suggest that he speaks on behalf of the entire Pulte family. To the contrary, Bill Pulte does not represent, nor is he a spokesperson for all members of the Pulte family in any capacity, quote, close quote, the family's charitable foundation said in a statement last year, though it said that the nonprofit bears no ill will towards Bill Party. Well, you know, family is family. They're going to stick together no matter what, especially when there's money involved. Last year, in the civil case brought by James against Trump and his family business, a New York judge concluded that Trump and his family had committed a decade of business fraud by overstating the value of their properties to get favorable loan terms, finning Trump and his sons nearly $500 million. We can't even get a loan for $100. We can't get a loan for nothing. An appeals court subsequently tossed the financial penalty, but upheld the finding that Trump committed fraud. Party, who has publicized his mortgage fraud claims about James since April, has equated the allegations against James to Trump's civil fraud case. I believe this is ridiculed with mortgage fraud, and he knows there's no fraud. And frankly, I think that's why she knew so much about the law in terms of how to go after President Trump. Party told Fox News, well, I don't believe anything coming from Fox News. They don't substantiate anything. They just throw crap out there because they're the racist and bigoted network. The Trump administration's probe of James began less than a month into the president's term when newly appointed U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the creation of a, quote, weaponization working group headed by Martin. Among the topics the group was created to examine was James's alleged federal cooperation to target President Trump, his family, and his businesses. 1 month after the Senate confirmed Party, he issued a criminal referral to the Department of Justice in April based on media reports alleging that James appears to have falsified records in order to meet certain lending requirements and receive favorable loan terms. How do we know that all these people who are alleging, always remember, people who are always accusing of people of something, they are the ones committing the fraud. They are the ones who are falsifying documents. They are the ones that are lying. Muddy the waters, muddy the atmosphere, accuse people, attack is the norm. It's time for the Democrats to take a page out of their books and start attacking them in the same vicious manner. Why not? If I were a politician, I would piss my opponents off. I would destroy them and obliterate them every chance I got. I wouldn't have no mercy on them, none. I would be one of the most vicious, aggressive politicians in the history of America. And I would win. Because I ain't no punk. You talk about me, I'm going to talk about you. You talk about my family, I'll talk about yours. You call me out of my name and I'll call you out of yours. No apologies. So the allegations centered on, well, I already read that. I'm not going to continue to read the same thing. So, since federal prosecutors began looking into James's Virginia property, they have interviewed or presented to the grand jury 15 witnesses, including insurers, loan officers. They're all liars. Underwriters, realtors, and James's niece. Liars, liars, liars. And James's niece is not going to turn against her aunt the same way that the family members don't turn against one another in politics now. To bring a case that she made false statements to a bank or federal financial institution, prosecutors will need to prove that James knowingly made a false statement with the intent to influence a bank. Sources tell ABC News that prosecutors have not found evidence to clear that high bar. So if they have not found any evidence, they're going to lie and try to manufacture it. Despite his investigation failing to yield a viable case, Martin has continued to aggressively pursue the claims with Trump's backing, sources said. He recently requested 2 to 3 experienced prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia and New York to help with the investigations. You know, I'm not going to read any more of this. I will say this. And if they charge her and they bring charges against her, she should sue the hell out of them for malicious intent. And don't let up. Sue them for sue them for $1 billion. A ridiculous amount. We live in neighborhoods just because neighbors don't like folk, they'll lie on their neighbor and make up stuff, call the police. Look at the Karens of the world. They're out there just doing all kind of dumb stuff. Look at the Shaniquas in the world. They're out there doing all kind of dumb stuff. Causing problems that they don't even exist. All right, I got to get up out of here. Got some official business to handle on this end. Never surrender. Never quit.